The shocking beginning. A viral video. It all began on a quiet September evening in 2022. Most people were scrolling through their usual social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, peering at pictures of homemade dinners, celebrity gossip, and the occasional animal rescue story. Yet amongst the usual outpour of mundane posts, something sinister emerged, a video so horrifying, so nauseating, that it could seize the attention of millions within hours. The video was titled provocatively, "Madman in the Owl Cage." At first it didn't seem like much. A dimly lit room, a shaky camera, the hushed sound of breathing from whoever held it. But then, what came next turned ordinary disgust into an unprecedented wave of outrage. A man wearing a dark mask stood in the frame holding what appeared to be a birdcage. Inside, two helpless owls flapped their wings in panic, their talons scraping futilely against the cold metal bars. The man's silence was unsettling. He didn't say a word, but his actions were loud enough, jarring movements, shaking the cage, taunting the terrified owls. Then, as if his previous acts weren't disturbing enough, he escalated his cruelty. Tossing the cage onto a nearby table, the man began methodically torturing the birds, mocking their helpless cries. The video didn't have any explanatory text. No captions, no descriptions, no location clues, only the horrifying imagery. Within hours, clips of the video spread like wildfire across Twitter under hashtags like #StopTheMadman and #Justice4Owls. Major news outlets started picking it up, amplifying the outrage. Reddit threads turned into investigative forums as amateur sleuths gathered to analyze every tiny frame of the footage, searching for clues. The collective question was clear: who could do something this vile, and why? For many, the video was more than just the depiction of cruelty. It was a stark reminder of the internet's double-edged sword. A space for connection and creativity, but also a platform for the disturbed to showcase their twisted acts. How could someone broadcast such violence for attention? Many asked in disbelief. The ripple effects were immediate. Animal welfare organizations issued public statements, offering bounties for any information on the person behind the mask. Activists sprang into action, forming digital coalitions bent on one goal: unmasking the culprit behind this grotesque display. More than anything, people wanted justice, not just for the owls but for everything their suffering symbolized. As the video continued circulating, the media frenzy intensified. Was this a one-time incident or part of a larger pattern? Who filmed it and where was it shot? Questions mounted, but answers were scarce. The internet watched, wide-eyed and collectively bristling as this bizarre new villain stepped into the spotlight. A person hidden by anonymity but destined to face the full force of a world united in anger. It wasn't long before the most chilling realization set in. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a challenge. Somewhere out there in that masked man's twisted psyche, he wasn't just committing heinous acts, he was daring the world to try and stop him. The video didn't end with remorse or hesitation, only with eerie silence as the screen faded to black, leaving viewers with a haunting void that demanded to be filled with answers. And so, what began as a simple upload, a sinister click of the post button, grew into something much larger. It sparked a moral battle, ignited a digital manhunt, and set the stage for one of the most gripping investigations in internet history. The internet's outrage. The moment the disturbing video titled "Madman in the Owl Cage" hit mainstream platforms, the internet erupted in a volcanic wave of emotion. It began with gut-wrenching disbelief. Disbelief that someone could harm innocent creatures so cruelly and capture those moments on video. But disbelief quickly turned into fury. Social media became a digital battleground as users from every corner of the world voiced their disgust, creating a deafening scream for justice. On Twitter, hashtags like #Justice4Owls, #StopTheMadman and #FindHim surged to the top of trending topics. Thousands of retweets turned into millions, with influencers, celebrities, and animal rights organizations joining the conversation. Instagram was flooded with posts from users overlaying the photo of the masked tormentor with bold red captions, calling for his capture. On TikTok, users created videos pleading for action, sharing the haunting details of the footage in unison. Some couldn't even bring themselves to watch the video but felt compelled to act, because silence, in their minds, meant complicity. "My heart broke," one Twitter user wrote, their post garnering thousands of likes within hours. "Who does this? Who? This man is a danger to more than just animals. We have to find him." Online forums like Reddit transformed into grassroots headquarters for justice. Subreddits dedicated to solving mysteries or discussing true crime became flooded with threads titled, "The Owl Cage Torturer, Help Find Him." In these threads, a collective of strangers played internet detective, analyzing every second of the video for clues. They picked apart the man's movements, the subtle reflections in the dimly lit room, and even ambient sounds in the background. Someone noticed the distinct, rhythmic ticking of a clock that stopped abruptly. Another user theorized the brand of the man's gloves based on the texture. "This isn't just about two owls," a comment on Reddit read, receiving thousands of upvotes. "It's about setting a precedent. If this man, this sick, twisted person gets away with it, who's to say he won't escalate? He needs to be stopped." The outrage didn't only exist in cyberspace, it crossed into the real world. Animal rights organizations sprung into action, issuing bold statements and offering rewards. The World Wildlife Foundation released a call to arms, urging communities to identify and report acts of animal cruelty, and PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, announced a $10,000 reward for any concrete lead. Schools began calling attention to the video during lectures on internet safety and ethics, warning students about the dark currents that flow beneath the surface of online platforms. But with every scream for righteousness, there came voices of frustration. Why wasn't law enforcement intervening? On Facebook live streams and YouTube videos, indignant internet users begged authorities to do something, complaining of institutional cowardice. "What good are laws if no one enforces them?" One passionate YouTuber bellowed in a fiery rant that racked up 1 million views in less than 24 hours. "This man is mocking us, mocking justice itself. Are we seriously sitting here waiting for another video, for another crime to happen? We need to act now." Frustration wasn't the only emotion coursing through the collective online consciousness. There was also fear. What if this person struck again? What if his next victim wasn't an animal but a person? The video wasn't just physical torment, it was psychological warfare aimed at an entire audience. The masked figure felt unstoppable, untouchable. Despite their shared outrage, a rift began to form within the internet's hive mind. Some users berated one another for not immediately reporting the clip to police, while others mocked amateur sleuths' clumsy attempts to crack the case. Conspiracy theories emerged in the chaos. Was this man some kind of organized criminal? Was this just a twisted social experiment? Or worse, was he baiting them into a trap? Amid the fervor, communities were born. Facebook groups were created with names like Justice for the Owls and Unmask the Madman, quickly gaining tens of thousands of members overnight. Each group became a microcosm of the internet's intensity, with moderators battling to keep discussions focused amidst a flood of emotional posts and speculative theories. Within one such group, a user posed a chilling thought. "What if he's watching us right now?" The comment sent a shiver down virtual spines. For a moment, their tireless speaking out, all their shouting into the void, felt vulnerable. Still, the fight pressed on. If he was watching, they reasoned, it was only further confirmation that they were hitting a nerve, closing in on him. Outrage birthed obsession. As days passed, the masked man was no longer just a faceless threat. He became a symbol of their rallying cry, a monster they were determined to unmask. Every click, every share, every retweet, and every angry comment coalesced into collective energy. The internet had seen many villains before him, but this time they swore the story would play out differently. They were more connected, more empowered, and more relentless than ever before. And yet, beneath the surface, an eerie truth loomed. Anger could only sustain the movement for so long. Without concrete clues, without progress in identifying him, the initial firestorm began to dim, replaced by an uncomfortable, lingering question. What if he was counting on that? What if all of this, the outrage, the hashtags, the forum threads, was part of his twisted plan from the very beginning? The first clue. The digital investigation into the masked man, now dubbed the Madman, was unlike anything the internet had seen before. Thousands of amateur sleuths from across the globe had banded together, driven by anger, heartbreak, and an insatiable need for justice. But despite the likes, comments, and endless debates in subreddit threads and Facebook groups, they hadn't yet unearthed their first big lead, or even the faintest crack in the masked man's identity. That changed one late night on a live stream. A live forum investigation was underway, hosted by one of the more prominent figures in the movement, Josh Larson, a tech expert turned true crime enthusiast with an audience of hundreds of thousands. The comments section was a frenzy of armchair detectives throwing theories against the wall. Then a message appeared, "Check the wristwatch." 3 simple words. It was the kind of suggestion easy to gloss over with all the noise. But Josh, ever the meticulous observer, paused the footage right on the man's hand. Sure enough, in one fleeting moment, the camera wobbled, barely a frame or two, but it was enough for a glimpse. A gleaming band of metal wrapping around the madman's left wrist. Excited murmurs filled the airwaves of the stream chat. Josh leaned closer, enhancing the frame. "That," he said after a brief but intense silence, "is not a generic watch. It was sleek, polished silver, distinctively shaped. Where a budget plastic band might have gone unnoticed, this particular watch was telling an entirely different story. This wasn't some dollar store knockoff or mass-produced item. It looked specialized, luxury even, and expensive enough to leave a trail behind." And that's when the real hunt began. Within hours, the internet detectives turned into horology experts. Dozens of people pored over catalogs of high-end watches, cross-referencing them with online reviews and auction sites. Once again, the hive mind rose to the task. The conclusion? It was a limited edition timepiece from a niche Italian brand called Ferro and Cielo. Fewer than 500 of those specific watches had ever been made. Suddenly, the investigation that had been chasing shadows now had its first tangible piece of evidence. A clue that could be traced in the real world. Of course, that sparked an entirely new challenge. How could they narrow down the purchaser list? Most people who bought limited edition products through official channels would leave their mark, names attached to receipts, registration warranties, shipping addresses. But Ferro and Cielo's data was sealed, protected behind strict privacy policies. No vendor would willingly hand over customer data just because thousands of internet users were loudly demanding it. This didn't stop them. Some sleuths shifted their focus to second-hand markets. Was the watch sold online? Auctioned? Did someone trade it at a pawn shop? Clues were painstakingly scoured across platforms like eBay, Craigslist, and luxury resellers. One eagle-eyed Redditor even discovered an outdated blog post from 2 years prior where a random user had posted a casual wristwatch flex. Sure enough, it was the same model of watch. The blog belonged to a man who signed his name as Matteo Lombardi, and it just so happened that Ferro and Cielo had been headquartered in his hometown, Milan. The detectives had a new name, and along with it, a small gasp of hope. Across every social network imaginable, the hunt for Matteo began. And when his name popped up again, casually tagged in a photo uploaded on Instagram, it gave the movement a rush of adrenaline. There Matteo was, photographed in Paris just 6 months ago, his smiling face and dapper suit exuding a far cry from the grim brutality of the Madman. Still, people pooled resources, combing through every public scrap they could find. Old Facebook posts showed Matteo selling off belongings, referencing an oversized purchase he regretted. Could those belongings have included the infamous watch? As momentum grew, armchair detectives began camping in Instagram comment sections, pestering Matteo about the purchase outright. When confronted, Matteo finally responded, perhaps frustrated by the sudden online harassment or maybe guilty under the looming pressure. What he said immediately shifted the investigation in another direction. "Yes, I owned that watch, but it's no longer mine. I sold it about a year ago on the private market, and no, I don't remember the buyer. Sorry, I can't help." Screenshots of his reply spread like wildfire, fueling a mix of hope and dread. A lead, found, and then abruptly broken. Facebook forums and Reddit threads lit up with debate. Some theorized Matteo wasn't telling the full truth, while others redirected their attention to tracking down auctions in private markets. Through it all, one unsettling thought began looming larger over the forums. The owner of this watch, the Madman, had planned everything meticulously. Whoever he was, he'd covered his tracks. Yet, even if Matteo no longer had the watch, it briefly tied the string between the Madman and something real. At last, this wasn't just myth or anonymity anymore. "The Madman beats us right now, but not for long," Josh declared on yet another viral livestream, capturing the sentiment of the growing movement. The network of investigators doubled down, fueled by Matteo's contribution and determined to follow the smallest breadcrumbs that might remain. The hunt was no longer based on speculation and fragments of a grim, haunting video. From this single wristwatch, a cold, glinting accessory, they'd found the first solid step toward unmasking an invisible villain. And while they didn't yet know it, this was only the beginning of a grueling transcontinental game of cat and mouse. The trail goes cold. Leads, as exhilarating as they can be, have one cruel truth: they don't always go anywhere. And for a case as twisted and chaotic as the Madman and the Owl Cage, Those involved quickly learned how fragile hope can feel when a trail turns into a wall of dead ends. After the internet latched onto Matteo Lombardi and the Ferro and Cielo wristwatch connection, it felt like they were finally closing in on their target. Everything seemed to align: a rare timepiece tied to a small group of buyers, a possible chain of ownership documented across social media breadcrumbs, and a vibrant digital community eager for answers. But even the most dedicated online detectives couldn't have prepared themselves for this moment. The discovery that Matteo wasn't their guy, and that his sale of the watch to an unnamed buyer a year earlier left no further traceable records. It started innocently enough. During a live-stream breakdown of Matteo's online responses, veteran investigator Josh Larson reassured viewers that momentum was on their side. Look, the watch itself is a golden ticket. If Matteo isn't the madman, then the person who bought it from him might be. It was the kind of confidence that rallied the internet into renewed bursts of activity. New Reddit threads appeared faster than moderators could approve them, and theories about secretive online auctions, underground trade platforms, and shady collectors began to swirl incessantly. But as hours turned into days, and then weeks, that confidence started to crack. The first issue was Matteo's own lack of memory. Private sale, he had claimed. No receipts, no paper trail. I was moving out of Milan, clearing out unnecessary stuff. The buyer could have been anyone. With his vague nonchalance and the absence of even an email or online record, digging further seemed almost hopeless. Could someone truly sell such a rare item without any digital breadcrumbs? The internet seemed divided. Half believed Matteo was withholding information, either to protect himself or out of fear of legal ramifications. The other half believed he was nothing more than a mildly careless watch enthusiast caught in the crossfire of a global witch hunt. Josh later convened with a small team of experts to dig deeper into what they could possibly glean from Matteo's story. They attempted to reconstruct his timeline, his move out of Milan, his listing of items for sale, and potential marketplaces where the watch may have been sold. Yet every marketplace they scoured came up empty. Certain platforms only saved active postings for a few months, while others purged older content entirely. If Matteo's buyer had been operating through private means, there was no conventional route to find them. Meanwhile, the collective frustration of the internet began to mount. Live-stream comments often mirrored the emotional frenzy of Twitter threads. "How do you not remember who bought your $2,000 watch?" Some raged. Others jumped straight to conspiracy theories. "Matteo knows more than he's letting on. What if he's involved? What if he's just as guilty?" Still, there were quieter voices in the fray, those reminding others that the investigation had outgrown Matteo. "We're focusing too much on one guy when there's a literal madman out there," one Reddit user wrote. "Matteo might have sold the watch, sure, but that's not where this trail ends. We need to focus on broader leads." The second major problem was the nature of the wristwatch itself. While the Ferro and Cielo was a limited edition, only 500 units were ever produced globally, which wasn't quite as exclusive as investigators had hoped. Those units, while rare, were scattered across continents, sold to collectors in Europe, Asia, and the US, many without publicly registered warranties. And while Ferro and Cielo's own customer database could have been a breakthrough, their rigid privacy policies made accessing that data near impossible. Not even a global outcry could sway corporate executives into bending their rules. "We'd need an official subpoena for that kind of information," a former investigator who frequently guest-starred on Josh's livestream explained. "This isn't a Netflix drama where companies just hand over sensitive data because we demand it loudly enough on Twitter." It was a sobering reminder of just how limited the movement's power was in the real world. Amid all this uncertainty, a chilling parallel began emerging: the idea that the madman had anticipated their struggles. As theorized by one particularly astute Redditor, "Whoever he is, this guy knows how to navigate the internet as well as the people hunting him." The watch could have been bait, something intentionally traceable to throw us off. The thought that their one solid lead might have been planted, a red herring, shook the community to its core. Meanwhile, with no new tangible clues and no major breakthroughs, public enthusiasm faced its own battle against entropy. Daily mention counts of #Justice4Owls peaked during the initial weeks of the case but began dwindling as competing viral moments distracted the collective consciousness. While die-hard sleuths stayed relentlessly focused, the broader internet gradually moved on. And yet, for those still entrenched in the hunt, every quiet night spent rewatching and reanalyzing footage felt like an unbearable test of patience. The comments under Josh's streams grew sparser. The activity in once bustling forums slowed to a crawl. The relentless flame of justice that had burned so brightly now flickered as though suffocating in the darkness. All anyone could ask was the same haunting question over and over. What now? And then, just as hope began to erode away entirely, something unexpected happened. The madman struck again. The next video appears. Just as the trail had gone cold, just as the fervent obsession of the internet had started to flicker into a distant hum of unresolved frustration, the masked man re-emerged. His return was sudden, audacious, and hauntingly calculated, almost as if he had been waiting for the exact moment when people thought the chaos was behind them. It began with the same kind of unease that spread during the first video. Late into an otherwise mundane Wednesday night, a handful of users on an obscure social media platform discovered a new upload titled, "Madman Returns, Watch Closely." The thumbnail was eerily reminiscent of the first video, a birdcage engulfed in shadows. But this time, the image was sharper, the room slightly different. And most disturbingly, the title seemed to taunt its audience with the words, "Watch closely." For a few hours the video passed unnoticed, tucked into the depths of a small, anonymous hosting site. But then, someone shared the link on Twitter, tagging #Justice4Owls, reigniting the dormant hashtag like a match to a dry tinderbox. By midnight, the video had exploded into a firestorm of activity. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. People were retweeting, sharing, commenting, dissecting. The news hit almost instantly. He's back. The video began the same way as the first, shrouded in darkness, dominated by trembling, uneven camera movements. But this time, the masked man didn't waste time building tension. He stepped directly into the frame within the first 5 seconds, seeming almost proud, his head tilted slightly as though daring the viewers to look away. The same dark mask covered his face, obscuring any identifiable features. His posture was relaxed, calm even, in the most sinister way imaginable. This wasn't the man of the first video skulking in the shadows. This was someone more brazen, emboldened by the attention his sick theatrics had garnered. In the center of the new frame was another birdcage, but instead of owls this time, there was a single falcon, a magnificent bird trembling slightly, yet maintaining a regal poise that only made its captivity more heartbreaking. As the camera zoomed in, the falcon's sharp eyes glinted in the dim light, radiating defiance even in its restrained state. At first glance, viewers thought they understood what type of cruelty they were about to witness, something almost identical to the trauma of the first video. But as the minutes ticked by, the masked man's method became alarmingly different. This time, there wasn't the immediate chaos or jarring physical actions that had defined the first attack. Instead, he circled the birdcage slowly, deliberately, as if trying to draw the agony out, not for the bird, but for the unseen audience watching on their screens. And then came the note. Unlike the silent, textless stream of horror from the first installment, this video introduced an element of direct communication. As the masked man moved behind the birdcage, he pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket and lifted it toward the camera lens. Scrawled across it in bold, childlike handwriting were the words, "What will you do this time?" The challenge was chilling. This wasn't someone hiding in anonymity anymore. This was a person feeding on the rage and attention he was generating online. The madman had escalated. His actions were now screaming to the world, "Catch me if you can." For nearly 10 agonizing minutes, the masked man toyed with the falcon's nerves, making faint movements and feigned attacks while the majestic bird grew visibly more panicked inside its cage. But just as the cruelty seemed poised to reach its peak, the masked man stopped abruptly. Instead of delivering whatever horror he seemed to have planned, he simply leaned forward and placed a second note into the cage with the bird. This one read, "Learn to lose." With that, the video abruptly cut to black. The reaction online was immediate and polarizing. For some, the masked man appeared to be escalating his psychological game, not just torturing animals but taunting an entire global audience that had been united in trying to stop him. "He's mocking us," one Reddit user posted bluntly, "and he knows exactly how much power he has because of it." Others, however, speculated wildly about the notes as potential clues. What did they mean? Was the message literal, or could it hint at his identity or next move? Entire forums dedicated hours to dissecting the handwriting, analyzing the choice of words, even the type of paper, but progress proved elusive. Animal rights organizations were swift to respond, condemning not only the masked man's acts but also the platforms that allowed such videos to spread. Calls for stricter content moderation grew louder. "This isn't just about a deranged individual anymore," said a representative from the World Wildlife Foundation in a televised statement. "It's about preventing the systems that enable him from perpetuating his cruelty." As outrage boiled over once again, social media was flooded with renewed cries for justice under hashtags like #StopTheMadman and #FalconGate. TikTok users began uniting in digital campaigns, many using emotional montages of the Falcon's trembling figure to rally support and create awareness. Live streams featuring amateur sleuths like Josh Larson gained record-setting views, with people across the world tuning in nightly to join the fight. Some thought the video's cryptic notes might hide geographic clues. Others believed the chosen falcon species was a hint, perhaps local to an area the masked man was operating from. The most terrifying thought, however, came from a new thread on Reddit's #Unresolved Mysteries. What if this isn't just about animals? What if he's preparing for something worse? The theory sent shockwaves across the digital community. If the madman was deliberately orchestrating his actions to garner maximum attention and instill widespread dread, how far could he escalate? What did he want, and how much damage was he willing to inflict before he was caught? These questions lingered like a poison in the air as every new viewer revisited the video in hopes of unlocking its secrets. The masked man's game was now more dangerous than ever, but for the internet at large, fueled by anger and desperation, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. An unexpected virtual trail. The renewed hunt for the masked man had consumed the internet. Every click, every pause in his hauntingly orchestrated videos, every cryptic word scrawled on his notes was analyzed to exhaustion. Yet, nothing felt concrete. As days blurred into weeks, the energy behind the investigation started to fragment, until one seemingly insignificant online discovery reignited it all. It began, as most breakthroughs do, with someone noticing something no one else thought to look at. An aspiring investigator, just a regular tech-savvy college student scrolling through late-night posts, sat hunched over a keyboard in a room lit only by the eerie glow of monitors. His Reddit handle, FalconEye23, had become a regular name in the discussion threads surrounding the case. While others chased the psychology of the madman, debated ethics, or still lingered on the infamous wristwatch lead, FalconEye decided to hunt in unorthodox places. Rather than trying to solve the who, he aimed to solve the what. Specifically, what connected these animals? Owls in the first video, a falcon in the second? Scrolling deeper into rabbit holes of online content related to animal trafficking and rare species, the breakthrough came in the form of a single, mundane-looking interaction. Deep within an obscure Facebook group dedicated to custom crafts for collectors, a place full of artists advertising specialty items, one company caught his eye. It was a small Italian-based workshop known for crafting custom cages and enclosures. Their posts, though ordinary at first glance, carried an air of familiarity for FalconEye. The shapes of the cages bore an uncanny resemblance to the bird cages in the madman's videos. Further clicks took him to their official website, a modest landing page advertising handmade animal cages, each one meticulously designed with intricate carvings and high-quality materials. Browsing through the product images felt like stepping into a gallery of uncomfortable coincidences. There it was, a polished photo of a bronze birdcage, the arching metal bar handle on top, the delicate floral engravings along the sides. It was unmistakable. That cage was identical to the one seen in both videos, down to the smallest detail. Heart-pounding, FalconEye dug deeper. He began combing through the company's history, its social media pages, even its customer engagement. The company, Artigiano al Volo, operated out of a quiet town in northern Italy, and while its history was sparse, its Facebook posts featured stories of notable clients who ordered large batches of custom cages in years past. Most stories highlighted zoos, bird enthusiasts, and falconing experts, but one post from several years earlier stood out. It mentioned an unusual private order, a bulk shipment of cages bought by a single anonymous client. The client's partial name was listed, M. Lombardi. A name that connected the clues like red strings across a corkboard. It was Matteo Lombardi, the same Matteo they had already interrogated, the man tied to the wristwatch lead that had gone cold. Reinvigorated, FalconEye brought the discovery to the Reddit community. "You won't believe what I found," he titled his post. It immediately took off, gathering thousands of upvotes in minutes and igniting the community anew. It wasn't just the link back to Matteo Lombardi that set everyone ablaze. It was the realization that a trail still existed. Josh Larson picked it up quickly. During his nightly livestream, he broke the discovery down piece by piece. "We ruled Matteo out as the Madman," he said cautiously, "but this shows he's connected in more ways than he let on. There's no denying that cages from Artigiano al Volo are featured in the videos. So what we need to figure out now is this. Did Matteo pass these cages along, or did his connection to this case go deeper than any of us imagined?" As speculation snowballed, the community bombarded Matteo Lombardi across social media once more. Comments under his posts became a battlefield of desperation and accusations. "You lied, you were never honest with us. Explain yourself, why are your cages in these videos? How many more animals have to suffer before you tell the truth?" At first, Matteo ignored the escalating pressure. Then, days later, likely unable to endure the mounting harassment, he posted a carefully worded statement. "I am innocent, and I'll prove it to you. The cages were sold years ago when I liquidated items for my business. I don't know who took them, but I have emails documenting the sale. Those responsible are not me." The skepticism was thick, but Matteo followed through, providing screenshots of emails dating back to the purchase of the cages. They featured a buyer referred to only by an alias, Vogelfrei89. The name seemed random at first. Vogelfrei, meaning outlaw in German, paired with a year or symbolic number. But it was enough. To seasoned internet sleuths, this was a crack in the dam. The alias was traced across forums, auction sites, and niche collector blogs. Piecing together usernames and digital fingerprints, a profile began to form. This Vogelfrei89 wasn't just any collector. They appeared to hover in shadowy corners of the internet, connected to controversial forums discussing ethical dominance over nature, disturbing posts about wild birds' behavior, and the practice of holding animals in captivity as a display of power. It was a digital rabbit hole of obsession, a footprint that hinted at a deep personal connection to the acts portrayed in the videos. But then, the most chilling discovery of all surfaced. Vogelfrei89 had recently posted a cryptic comment on a now-defunct forum for exotic animal traders. The comment, "You'll all understand soon. Watch closely. Learn to lose." The exact words scrawled on the notes in the Madman's second video. The community lost itself in the revelation. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was intentional. Vogelfrei89 wanted to be found. He'd left a trail, breadcrumbs tainted with malice. Josh summed it up best during a live broadcast that night. "This guy isn't hiding anymore, he's inviting us. And you know what? We'll follow. Wherever his trail leads, we're not stopping." The discovery of Vogelfrei89 wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a turning point, shifting the once cold trail into a smoldering path of clues. But behind the thrill of the chase, unease churned. What kind of person lays a challenge so openly, hiding just enough to make himself untouchable? What was next? More importantly, what game was he playing? The investigation takes a turn. The discovery of Vogelfrei89 had reignited the fire behind the investigation. What had once felt like a dead-end trail now glimmered with promise. The name, a peculiar alias buried deep within the murky underworld of niche internet forums, had given investigators something tangible to chew on. But as the days wore on, the pursuit for more concrete answers proved to be anything but simple. What followed next was a whirlwind of breakthroughs, frustrations, and a game of cat and mouse that would leave even the most determined digital detectives questioning how far they were willing to go. At first, the online sleuths, led in large part by Josh Larson and his growing following of true crime enthusiasts, focused on connecting details from the alias Vogelfrei89. The cryptic comments that matched the notes in the videos were enough to convince them they were on the right track. However, peeling back the layers of anonymity surrounding this figure proved tedious. Whoever Vogelfrei89 was, they were skilled at staying in the shadows. IP addresses were masked through multiple layers of virtual private networks, VPNs. Online interactions were sporadic and deliberately vague, and their forum activity often disappeared as quickly as it surfaced. It was as though they wanted to be found, but not caught. Still, the community pressed on with relentless focus, digging through seemingly endless threads and digital clues, often poring over archived screenshots of defunct websites. A breakthrough moment came during one of Josh's now infamous live streams. A frequent viewer, who went by the username Binary Fox, managed to trace an old email address tied to Vogelfrei89's forum registrations. This email address had never been used on mainstream platforms. It wasn't tied to Facebook, LinkedIn, or any major social profiles, but Google search results revealed one obscure hit from nearly a decade ago. The email appeared on a blog post written in German about the ecology of endangered birds native to Northern Europe. The blog itself was dormant, having been abandoned sometime in 2015, but it was enough to provoke curiosity. Josh and his audience dove in, scraping as much information from the outdated site as possible. What they found was startling. The author, or someone claiming to be the author, had once been a vocal advocate for ethical falconry, posting under the pseudonym L. Meyer. "Could this be our guy?" Josh asked his audience during a live analysis. His words hung heavy in the air, the comments section exploding within seconds. People quickly pieced together the initials of L. Meyer with the name Lucas Meyer, a German man suspected of involvement in exotic bird trafficking years prior. While he had never been formally charged, rumors had circled about his eccentric behavior and obsessive tendencies, particularly concerning birds of prey. Some even recalled stories of Meyer being banned from local wildlife reserves for harassing animals or employees. The idea that Vogelfrei 89 could be connected to Lucas Meyer was compelling and electrified the online community. The new narrative painted Meyer as someone with a history of both criminal activity and deep fascination with birds. The perfect storm for a man who had escalated his actions to the horrifying displays seen in the Madman videos. But before anyone could claim victory, there was a problem. No concrete evidence existed to link Meyer directly to Vogelfrei 89 or to the videos themselves. For every hopeful post about progress, skeptics swarmed in to remind everyone that coincidences didn't equal proof. Adding to the frustration, Lucas Meyer's known public records were scarce. According to fragments unearthed by amateur sleuths, Meyer had reportedly moved multiple times over the last decade. The most recent rumors placed him somewhere near a forested rural area in Germany. But finding someone who wanted to remain hidden in vast, remote territory was no easy task. "This feels too big for us," one frustrated streamer admitted during their own coverage of the case. "We've done the legwork, we've followed the hints, but this is where people like us hit a wall. We need something more. We need law enforcement to get on board before things get out of hand." The sentiment wasn't wrong. Despite all their buzz, the investigation had never truly broken through into the mainstream conversation again. News outlets had largely shifted focus to different trending stories, leaving the Madman mystery once again buried in niche corners of the internet. Some argued it was intentional, suggesting platforms and corporations wanted to suppress attention surrounding the case, fearing backlash over allowing the videos to spread in the first place. Others argued it was simpler. People were losing interest. But then, just as the community's morale began to dip, Lucas Meyer returned to them, or rather, his alias did. Out of nowhere, Vogelfrei 89 reappeared on a relatively unknown deep web forum, a place that catered to discussions about fringe behaviors, often skirting legality. This time, there was no vague comment to dissect, no cryptic riddle. Vogelfrei 89 uploaded what appeared to be a scan of a handwritten note. The image was poorly lit, slightly blurred on purpose, but its central message was clear. "You've all been so entertaining. Laughable, really. Let's see if you can find me now." The mocking tone sent a wave of rage and dread through the community, but what captured their attention wasn't just the text. Upon closer inspection, someone noticed an accidental detail in the background of the image, a fragment of a map. It was faint, barely visible in the shadows of the photo, but several viewers instantly recognized it. The jagged outline of a tree-covered area stood out, the isolated wilderness of Bavarian Forest National Park in southeastern Germany. This was it. For months, they had been chasing digital breadcrumbs, and now finally, they had a physical location to focus on. What followed was chaos. The internet swarmed with activity. Live streams, tweets, and posts exploded in popularity again, this time with people creating theories about where exactly in the national park somebody like Meyer, if it was indeed Meyer, might be hiding. True crime bloggers tried to independently contact park rangers and local authorities, demanding someone investigate, while some hardcore sleuths even floated the idea of attempting trips to Germany themselves, hoping to aid the search in person. Through it all, there remained one terrifying question nobody could answer. Why now? Why had the madman chosen to taunt them so openly, knowing full well it might lead directly to his capture? Was it all overconfidence? Arrogance rooted in the attention he'd cultivated over months of digital evasion? Or was this all part of something more sinister? Another level to whatever game he'd been playing all along. For the first time in months, both amateur detectives and law enforcement found themselves aligning. This wasn't just a wild chase of theories anymore. They had a name, possibly, a location, vaguely, and a reason to believe the madman's endgame was finally in sight. But one haunting question remained unanswered. Were they closing in on him, or had he been leading them exactly where he wanted them to go? The culprit reveals himself. For months the internet had been circling the identity of the Madman, pulling at threads that seemed barely connected while chasing the ghost of a man willing to flaunt his cruelty in front of the world. Vogelfrei, 89, the alias linked to cryptic messages, shadowy forums, and sinister videos, felt tangible, yet slippery. Each breakthrough was tempered by frustration, and every glimmer of hope was obscured by his shrewd ability to keep himself just out of reach. But what nobody expected was what came next. The moment when the Madman exposed himself, or so they thought. It started during an emotionally charged livestream hosted by Josh Larson, the voice and face of the online investigation. By now Josh's audience had swelled to millions, a mix of amateur psychologists, tech enthusiasts, animal rights activists, and true crime followers who had become addicted to the mystery. Josh had just started breaking down the latest lead, the vague map fragment from Vogelfrei 89's last stunt, which pointed toward Bavarian Forest National Park in southeastern Germany. The speculation was spiraling. Viewers debated everything: the map's credibility, whether Lucas Meyer matched Vogelfrei 89's behavior, and what exactly the Madman's purpose was. The chat box scrolled so fast it became a blur, thousands of people engaging in frantic commentary all at once. And then, it happened. In the middle of the broadcast, less than 10 minutes into the live stream, Josh paused mid-sentence. His expression faltered. Something had caught his eye in the live chat, something that froze him in place. The chaotic flood of comments slowed slightly as others noticed his reaction. "Hold on," Josh said, leaning toward his monitor. "Wait a minute, what is that?" At first, viewers couldn't understand what was going on. Then, as Josh highlighted a specific comment, hearts sank all around the world. The username Vogelfrei89, the very alias that had haunted their search, appeared in the chat, bold and undeniable. He wasn't hiding on niche forums anymore. He was there, watching, taunting, live in front of tens of thousands of people. The message he posted was short, simple, and disturbing. "Nice try finding me. You missed something." The chat exploded. Comments ranged from shock to disbelief to outright anger. Thousands of viewers spammed the feed, calling for Josh to ban the account, track the IP, or report the user immediately. Josh, for his part, stared at his screen, visibly unsettled. He fumbled with his mouse. "Is this real?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Someone tell me this isn't real." But it was. Vogelfrei89 continued to post, one chilling comment after another. "You're all very predictable. Do you like games? It's almost over, but not in the way you think." For every cryptic sentence, theories exploded. Some believed it wasn't him, that it was just a troll hijacking their investigation. Others argued it had to be the Madman himself. The phrasing, the cryptic arrogance, it matched his previous notes. But the most disturbing moment came when he posted a final line before disappearing from the chat entirely. "Check your email, Josh." Josh froze. For a moment you could hear a pin drop. Then, in slow realization, he opened the inbox linked to his livestream channel, his face pale as he clicked on an unread message. He stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before speaking. "It's a video," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Once again, the Madman had sent a new recording, but this time it wasn't anonymous viewers on obscure websites who discovered it. It was Josh himself, the video itself. Josh didn't play the clip right away, much to the frustration of his viewers. "Hold on," he said, clearly shaken. "I need to make sure this isn't... I don't know what this is." He muted his mic and camera, leaving the audience in suspense as he appeared to preview the file. When the livestream resumed a few minutes later, there was no mistaking the fear in his eyes. "Guys," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to say this, but this video, it's addressed to us, to everyone watching." The clip opened with the man in the mask, the Madman, sitting in a chair, illuminated by an overhead light. Unlike the previous videos, there was no birdcage in sight, no animals, just him and the camera. This time he didn't rely on mysterious notes or implied messages. He spoke directly. "Hello, Josh," the man started, his voice distorted but undeniably human. "Hello to all of you out there. You've worked so hard to find me, haven't you? Pulling at every thread, chasing shadows, convincing yourselves that you could win. But you don't understand. You've never understood." He leaned closer to the camera, the mask's dark eye holes staring directly into the audience. "You think you're in control, but you're not. I've been guiding you. Every clue, every lead, it's because I wanted you to have them. And now, here we are. The rest of the video was a nightmare. The madman revealed glimpses of personal artifacts, items intentionally designed to spread doubt, fear, and paranoia. A shot of a public park, one eerily similar to places speculated about in the investigation. A quick pan across a table with what appeared to be handwritten notes, one of them reading, "It's almost time." Finally, the man ended the video with a statement that sent chills across millions of viewers. "You'll see me soon." The screen faded to black, and with it, the livestream descended into chaos. People begged Josh to analyze the footage further. They theorized meanings for every detail. What public park was shown? Were the items real locations, or were they staged to bait them again? And what did he mean by soon? The aftermath of the revelation. The video spread like wildfire, making headlines within hours. News outlets picked up the clip, leading to a media blitz that reignited international attention to the case. Theories flooded every corner of the internet. Twitch streams dissected every frame of the footage. TikTok creators uploaded emotional reactions, and Reddit exploded with speculation over the new details. But beneath the surface, both investigators and law enforcement alike asked the same unnerving question: why was the madman doing this? Was it arrogance, a need for attention, or was he leading them toward something bigger? Josh, who had unintentionally become the face of the investigation, hated what it had turned into. "This isn't just curiosity anymore," he admitted during a follow-up stream. "This is personal now. He's targeting us. All of us." The madman, it seemed, wasn't hiding anymore. If anything, he was inviting the world directly into his twisted, calculated game. And while the email was a breakthrough, it left everyone with one terrifying thought: what does he want us to see next? The culprit is pursued. It began the way stories like this always seem to, quietly, unexpectedly, like the calm before a storm. For months, the search for the madman had felt like chasing a phantom, a man whose cruelty and arrogance had somehow kept him just out of reach. But after his bold reappearance, after he personally taunted the digital world with his chilling emails and videos, he made one fatal mistake, giving his hunters just enough breadcrumbs to find him. The name Lucas Meyer, a suspect tied loosely to the alias Vogelfrei89, was now firmly in the spotlight. His erratic history, his rumored ties to exotic animal trafficking, and his cryptic commentaries in niche forums all pointed toward a man who had both the means and motive to orchestrate the horrific acts seen in the madman's videos. And though he'd spent years cultivating a carefully constructed digital smokescreen, the cracks in his anonymity had begun to widen. A global effort. Once Vogelfrei89's identity began to solidify as Lucas Meyer, the investigation transformed into something bigger, more urgent. This was no longer just an internet mystery fueled by amateur detectives and social media outrage. Law enforcement agencies across multiple countries began working together, pooling resources and intelligence in a coordinated effort to hunt Meyer down. Interpol put out a red notice, a global alert classifying him as a wanted man, dangerous and possibly unstable. His name appeared on international watch lists, and his last known locations became the focus of a major investigation. Germany's federal police took a leading role, combing through years' worth of records, flagged transactions, and whispered rumors about Meyer's activities. He had been untraceable for years, living on the fringes of society, but his association with illegal wildlife trade linked him to shadowy networks that had left faint digital footprints. Exotic bird sales, custom cages traced back to Italian manufacturers, and cryptic messages on deep web forums were all examined under a microscope. But Meyer's greatest weapon was his lifestyle of isolation. He had been operating in the rural wilderness of Germany for years, rarely interacting with society except when absolutely necessary. There were rumors that he had purchased a remote cabin deep in the Bavarian forest, a dense, sprawling wilderness near the Czech border. Witnesses occasionally recalled a lone man trekking out of the forest for supplies, a man who kept his head down, paid in cash, and avoided eye contact. But no one could confirm whether it was Meyer or just a recluse who wanted no part of the modern world. What makes him dangerous isn't just what he's capable of doing, one investigator told the media. It's how calculated he is. Meyer thrives off staying one step ahead. He's a manipulator who knows how systems work and how to stay under their radar. Still, the hunt was relentless. Police units scoured Meyer's last known addresses, including his parents' home in Hamburg, an abandoned rental property in Munich, and even a storage unit rented under a false name. Forensics teams searched for traces of DNA, receipts, or handwritten notes that could tie Meyer more definitively to Vogelfrei 89. Beyond Germany, Interpol agents investigated leads in southern Europe, where Meyer may have engaged with illegal traders who specialized in rare and exotic animals. The media frenzy. As news of the manhunt spread, the press descended like a storm. Television anchors described Meyer as a textbook monster whose crimes had shocked the conscience of the modern world. His mugshot, unearthed from a decade-old minor arrest related to trespassing, was plastered across headlines and news tickers. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #CaptureTheMadman and #JusticeForOwls dominated Twitter. TikTok creators made dramatic videos analyzing Meyer's possible whereabouts or breaking down his psychological profile. Was he a narcissist? A sociopath? Was he addicted to the power his crimes gave him? Amateur sleuths on Reddit debated endlessly over Meyer's motives, his habits, even his upbringing, dissecting every available detail in search of a clue law enforcement might have overlooked. But as the global manhunt intensified, so did the fear in the community following the case. Meyer had taunted his pursuers, implied that he was always in control, and had orchestrated his reappearances with terrifying precision. What if he had anticipated all of this? What if the pursuit itself was exactly what he wanted? Closing in, a remote cabin. It wasn't until weeks later that the first definitive breakthrough came. A joint task force led by German police uncovered financial records showing that Meyer had been receiving deliveries to a remote area near Bavarian Forest National Park. At first glance, the transactions seemed innocuous: bottled water, non-perishable foods, camping supplies. But they pointed to something bigger. Meyer was living off the grid, hiding in one of Europe's most isolated regions. Drones equipped with heat sensors were deployed, scanning vast portions of the forest for signs of human activity. Helicopters circled overhead while ground teams combed through dense vegetation, searching for anything that looked like a makeshift camp or cabin. Rangers familiar with the forest's terrain assisted, guiding search teams through trails that were nearly invisible under the thick canopy of trees. It wasn't long before their efforts bore fruit. A small team of trackers spotted something, faint smoke rising above the tree line, barely visible against the dawn sky. They moved cautiously, navigating the rugged terrain until they uncovered an old cabin, weathered by years of neglect but clearly inhabited. Outside they found cages, dozens of them, stacked haphazardly and still dusted with feathers. The task force prepared for a possible confrontation. Heavily armed officers surrounded the property under the cover of darkness, their nerves electrified with tension. This was it. After months of pursuit, they finally had Meyer cornered. There would be no escape this time: the arrest. Just before sunrise, the operation began. A tactical team breached the cabin's front door, calling out for Meyer to surrender. Inside, the air reeked of sweat, damp wood, and animal waste. The walls were lined with shelves cluttered with outdated books, scraps of paper, and jars of what appeared to be animal remains. At the center of the room, Meyer sat calmly in a chair, his hands folded in his lap as though he had been expecting them all along. The mask he had worn in his videos sat on the table before him. "You found me," he said, his voice eerily nonchalant. "Took you long enough." Meyer was arrested without incident, but as he was led out in handcuffs, his words echoed in the ears of the officers present. "This isn't over yet. You have no idea what's coming." Unanswered questions. The world breathed a sigh of relief when news broke of Meyer's capture. Headlines celebrated it as a victory of justice over cruelty, as proof that even the most cunning predators couldn't hide forever. But for those who had followed the case closely, the satisfaction was clouded by lingering unease. What did Meyer mean by, "You have no idea what's coming"? Had he planned something bigger even as the net was closing in on him? And what about the deeper motivations behind his crimes? Was it all about power, obsession, or was there another layer that nobody had yet uncovered? As Meyer was escorted into custody, the global investigation was far from over. Digital forensics teams pored over his confiscated laptops and hard drives, which they hoped would reveal not only the full extent of his activities, but also whether anyone else had been involved. And as the sun set over the Bavarian forest that evening, casting long shadows over the cabin that had served as his secluded lair for so long, one fact remained clear: catching Meyer was just the beginning. The scars his actions had left, on his victims, on the internet, and on the people who had hunted him, would linger for years. The dark truth revealed. The courtroom was packed, brimming with reporters, investigators, and the morbidly curious public who had followed the case of Lucas Meyer, now dubbed the Madman, with obsessive fascination. After months of pursuit, gruesome discoveries, and cryptic mind games, the world was finally about to get a glimpse behind the mask. The room was eerily silent as Meyer entered, his hands shackled and his demeanor unnervingly calm. He was thinner than expected, his face pale and gaunt after weeks in custody, but his piercing stare appeared to gleam with something unsettling. Not fear, not regret. Something closer to defiance. As Meyer was seated, the murmur of the crowd began to swell. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. After months of cryptic notes, stomach-turning videos, and evasive taunts, Meyer was about to face justice and be stripped of the mystery that had both terrified and captivated the world. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of Meyer as a dangerous narcissist, a manipulator who took perverse joy in the suffering of others. They presented the recordings, the infamous owl and falcon videos, and described Meyer's calculated online trail. The evidence was damning. Animal remains found near his cabin, receipts for custom cages purchased under aliases, his connections to illegal wildlife trafficking. Every detail hammered home the same point. Meyer wasn't just disturbed, he was deliberate, methodical, and entirely lacking in remorse. But the most chilling moment came when Meyer himself spoke. Meyer's confession. Taking the stand with an almost eerie composure, Meyer began his statement. At first his tone was cold and clinical, almost academic, as if he were lecturing a room full of inattentive students. "You all think you've cornered a monster," Meyer said, his voice low but steady against the tense silence of the courtroom. "That's the narrative, isn't it? I'm a madman, driven by some insane urge to hurt and destroy for no reason. But the truth is far more complicated." A murmur rippled through the audience, the prosecution scrambling to object. Still, Meyer continued, choosing his words carefully as the room seemed to hold its collective breath. "Have you ever felt powerless?" he asked, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom. "I mean, truly powerless? Like the entire world doesn't see you, even if it's staring right at you?" Meyer paused, as if waiting for an answer only he understood. "That's what it was like for me, invisible, irrelevant, forgotten." He went on to explain, or rather to justify his dark descent, framing himself not as a predator but as a victim of the world's indifference. He spoke of his early years living in isolation, his lonely walks through forests where he would study birds in meticulous detail. He claimed that from an early age, he felt a connection with creatures that relied on instinct, beauty, and survival because their existence was fleeting, judged, confined, and valued only for what they could provide. "They fascinated me because they were always trying to escape something, always fighting against cages, against control." His voice hardened. "I realized we aren't so different from the animals we cage. Aren't we all trying to escape something? Expectations, pain, meaninglessness?" What began as reflective turned darker as Meyer shifted to discussing the videos, the very evidence of his crimes. "People think those videos were about the animals," he said with a ghost of a smile. "And they were, of course, but not in the way you think. They weren't the victims, they were symbols. Each video was meant to show you something, how easily control can be taken, how quickly beauty, freedom, life, how quickly it can all be reduced to nothing, and how powerless you'll feel watching it." The cold twist in his words sent chills through the courtroom. His confession wasn't just an admission, it was a manifesto, the origins of the madness. Meyer described how his obsession first began. Years before the world even knew of him, he had quietly lurked in dark corners of the internet, consuming videos of cruelty and violence as if searching for answers buried within them. It didn't take long for his voyeurism to turn into something more, a need to create, to orchestrate events in which he held all the power. It was never about the act itself, Meyer claimed. It was about the feeling of holding the entire world's attention in the palm of my hand, forcing it to look at the things it would rather ignore, its own ignorance, its own complicity. He admitted to baiting the online community deliberately, setting up his trail like a game for them to follow. The emails, the posts, the wristwatch, the cages, it was all part of the design. "You all danced beautifully," he sneered, his tone suddenly venomous. But then, he spoke of something even darker. What some in the courtroom called a revelation and others called an excuse. Meyer described his past, hinting at deep trauma he had suffered but refusing to elaborate. "Imagine living your life being controlled by others, by parents who didn't care, by systems designed to chew you up and spit you out. Pain teaches you things. It teaches you that the control you never had is the only thing worth chasing. The forensic evidence beyond Myers' chilling confession, further investigations uncovered even more unsettling truths. Digital records from Myers' confiscated laptops revealed a horde of disturbing content. Notes detailing the psychological responses of viewers he wanted to manipulate, sketches of his cruel videos, and even practice runs where he filmed himself rehearsing his spoken lines. More alarmingly, police found drafts of emails written to famous activists, taunting them, threatening further escalation, though none had ever been sent. Was this a sick game that Meyer had always planned to take further, or did he simply want the possibility of extending his control over the people he envied? It wasn't clear. What was clear, however, was that Meyer had acted entirely alone. No accomplices, no network, just one man in his forest cabin, orchestrating misery one meticulously planned video at a time. The world's reaction news of Meyer's confession broke like wildfire. Overnight, the narrative shifted. What had once been a simple case of cruelty and internet mystery morphed into something broader, a harsh indictment of the systems that had both spawned and enabled Meyer's rise. People debated whether he was a genius, a monster, or both, a man capable of manipulating an entire world obsessed with uncovering his identity. Psychologists appeared on every news station, some calling Meyer a pathological narcissist, others declaring him a sociopath. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief, while some, disturbingly, admired his intellect and cunning. "This isn't just a case about one man," said a prominent journalist during a televised discussion. "It's about the society that created him. What happens when isolation, obsession, and the hunger for power mix with the anonymity of the internet? Lucas Meyer isn't just a criminal, he's a mirror the world doesn't want to look into." Meyer's last words. As his trial came to a close, Meyer addressed the courtroom one last time. His voice carried none of the swagger or smugness from before. If anything, it was detached, resigned. "All of this," he gestured vaguely, his hollow voice filling the silence. "It doesn't matter. You win. Throw me in a cage, call me a monster. But there's more of me out there. You've seen it, you'll see it again." And just like that, he fell silent. A dark legacy. Lucas Meyer was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His cabin in the Bavarian forest was demolished shortly after his conviction, its haunting presence replaced with trees. But for all the closure his arrest and conviction brought, the legacy of his crimes lingered. The case of the Madman changed how people viewed the internet, cruelty, and the very nature of power itself. Conversations about regulating online platforms grew louder, while advocacy groups demanded better control over violent content and animal cruelty. But for every lesson learned, one terrifying reality remained. Meyer had shown the world how easily darkness can rise from the shadows, and how seductive that darkness could be. The community learns a lesson. When the dust began to settle on what came to be known as the Madman case, the world was left grappling with its aftermath. Lucas Meyer's arrest and conviction may have brought the individual responsible to justice, but the scars left by his actions, both physical and emotional, were raw and impossible to ignore. His videos, his chilling confession, and the months of psychological games he played with investigators and online communities didn't just leave victims in their wake, they forced an uncomfortable reckoning. At first it seemed like the internet wanted to treat the case like yet another shocking true crime tale, a juicy story to dissect, analyze, and eventually move on from. Discussion boards detailed every piece of evidence, live streamers capitalized on the final moments of Meyer's capture, and TikTok speculating on his twisted psyche went viral endlessly. But unlike other high-profile cases, this one refused to fade from memory. Something about it stuck. It haunted people, partly because of Meyer's shocking cruelty, but more so because his crimes felt like a reflection of something broader and deeper. Meyer's videos weren't just acts of individual malice, they were a sick, twisted mirror showing a society failing to recognize the consequences of its own dark corners. For many, the case became less about Meyer himself, and more about the systems, technologies, and collective actions or inactions that enabled him to thrive. The internet's role, fuel or shield? One of the most sobering realizations to emerge from the investigation was how much Meyer relied on the internet to carry out, amplify, and protect his crimes. He was more than a man committed to cruelty. He was a manipulator who used the internet as his weapon, weaponizing platforms, exploiting anonymity, and preying on human curiosity. Online communities that had lent their collective power to solving the case began to reflect deeply on their role within it. Sure, they had helped unearth critical leads and kept the pressure on law enforcement, but had their obsession also fueled Meyer's ego? Did their fascination with every cryptic clue give him exactly the attention he so craved? "We gave him the stage," one Reddit user wrote in a viral post on a true crime thread. If we're being honest with ourselves, he probably loved that we obsessed over him. Every thread, every trending hashtag, it wasn't just chasing him, it was feeding him. Others pointed to Meyer's calculated use of obscure forums and anonymous accounts, which highlighted the gaping flaws in online security. How was it that platforms clearly hosting dangerous content, illegal wildlife trafficking, cruel videos and troll-filled discussions, continued to exist unchecked? The case sparked heated debates about the need for more vigilant moderation and regulation of online spaces, but there were no easy answers. Supporters of freer internet practices warned against letting fear drive over-regulation, while activists called for stricter policies to ensure such vile acts could never gain a platform again. "We're caught in a loop," one journalist remarked during a news special examining the aftermath of the case. "On one hand, the internet is an incredible tool for collective good, bringing people together to solve crimes like this one. On the other, it creates the perfect harbor for people like Lucas Meyer to spread their darkness. The question isn't just how we stop the next Meyer, it's how we ensure the internet doesn't give him a louder megaphone." Mental health and isolation. Beyond the internet's role, the case raised deeper, more painful questions about society's invisible fractures, especially around mental health, social isolation, and the seeds of malevolence lurking in the ignored corners of humanity. Meyer's defense team had briefly touched upon his troubled upbringing, hinting at years of abuse, neglect and loneliness that reportedly warped his view of the world. And while his actions were indefensible, they sparked important questions. How many others slipped through the cracks like Meyer did? How many individuals, alienated and unsupported, retreat into darkness with catastrophic results? Schools, universities and workplaces began to hold more open conversations about mental health in the aftermath of the case. Several organizations launched advocacy campaigns aimed at bridging the gap between at-risk individuals and the resources they desperately need. But Meyer's case wasn't just about identifying potentially harmful individuals, it was a reminder to communities everywhere, a reminder of the profound importance of connection, of empathy, of reaching out before it's too late. Meyer wasn't born a monster, one prominent psychologist said during a televised analysis. He was shaped by a lifetime of neglect, ridicule, and dissatisfaction with his place in the world. He found solace in harm and power over others because no one ever gave him a sense of power over his own life. If we're ever going to prevent the next Madman, it starts by recognizing the silent pain of people like him before they spiral into darkness. Animal welfare in the spotlight. One of the case's most tangible ripple effects arose within the world of animal welfare. Meyer's crimes had horrified millions not just because of their nature, but because they forced people to look directly at the reality of animal cruelty in ways they often avoided. The video of the trembling owl and the majestic falcon trapped in the cage became iconic, both of the case itself and of society's broader failings in protecting vulnerable creatures. Animal rights groups seized this moment, launching global campaigns with renewed energy to raise awareness about wildlife trafficking, exotic pet trading, and animal abuse. Donations to organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, PETA, and other animal defense groups surged overnight. Schools incorporated more lessons on animal rights and ethics into their curricula. Some laws regulating the treatment and trade of wild animals were even revisited, though progress remained inconsistent depending on the region. Lucas Meyer became infamous because of what he did, one animal rights advocate explained during a televised panel. But let me be clear, his actions are part of a larger, ongoing problem. If people don't stay angry, if they don't stay motivated beyond the shock and viral videos, then nothing changes. We need this to be a turning point. A shift in online behavior. Perhaps the most surprising lesson from the case lies in how it changed the internet's behavior, even if only temporarily. The communities that had once obsessively followed Meyer's twisted game began to question their instinct for morbid fascination. Reddit threads and live streams became flooded with discussions not just about Meyer's crimes, but about their own role in enabling him. "It feels gross," one true crime podcaster admitted during a reflection episode about the case's conclusion. "I think we all just wanted to solve the mystery, to feel like we were the good guys outsmarting the bad guy, but looking back, I don't know. Did we play right into his hand?" This shift sparked a broader reckoning within the true crime and internet culture communities, with many influencers encouraging their audiences to shift focus away from simply consuming violence and towards actively supporting justice, victim advocacy, and preventative measures. In some ways, Meyer may have accomplished something he hadn't planned, forcing the world to confront its darker impulses, both his and their own. A collective reminder. The legacy of Lucas Meyer is one of warning and reflection. His crimes proved that cruelty can thrive in silence, that isolation can breed danger, and that obsession, no matter how well-intentioned, can be easily manipulated. But it also proved something else, that communities, when united, can shine light into the darkest corners. The Madman case wasn't solved by a single person, agency, or effort. It was solved because of people who refused to look away, because of those who, despite the terror he caused, decided that justice and accountability were worth fighting for. In the end, Lucas Meyer was a single man, but his story serves as a broader reminder of the cracks in the systems we rely on: an internet that enables anonymity, a society that often ignores mental health, and a world that too easily turns a blind eye to cruelty. As one investigator poignantly said in a final press conference, this case shouldn't just make us ask, how did Lucas Meyer do this? It needs to make us ask, how can we stop this from happening ever again? Conclusion and warning. Lucas Meyer had finally been captured, confined, and sentenced. His days of cruelty and manipulation were over. The trial was finished, the doors to his makeshift lair in the remote Bavarian forest were forever sealed, and justice, at least in some form, had been served. But as the world began to carry on, shadows of Meyer's actions still lingered, a haunting reminder that something about his case wasn't so easily left behind. This wasn't simply a story about one man's descent into unimaginable darkness. It was a cautionary tale, a terrifyingly clear illustration of how the modern world, with its technological might and human vulnerabilities, had created a stage for someone like Lucas Meyer to thrive. And though Meyer himself was silenced behind bars, the wake of his crimes would ripple far into the future, the illusion of an ending. For many, Meyer's sentencing marked an endpoint. He could no longer inflict harm. He could no longer exploit the internet's shadows or torment the innocent. There were no more chilling videos, no cryptic notes, no taunts in live-stream chats sending millions into a frenzy. Those who had followed the long, winding investigation, the amateur sleuths, animal rights activists, and true crime enthusiasts, finally exhaled. And yet the so-called ending was anything but comforting. Meyer's final words during his trial hung over the public like an ominous cloud. "You've seen it, you'll see it again." Was it arrogance? Or a prophecy of something far darker to come, reflections on a broken system? The Madman case, as it came to be known, forced society to reckon with how it had enabled someone like Meyer to emerge. From his anonymity on shadowy internet forums to his ability to orchestrate acts of extreme cruelty without detection, Meyer's crimes shone an unforgiving light on just how fragile many of society's systems had become. The internet, the immense, sprawling landscape of human connection and creativity, had been weaponized. Platforms designed for sharing information, community, and entertainment had become tools for broadcasting horror and spreading terror. Meyer knew this, and he used it to his advantage. He had thrived because he understood his environment. He understood human nature's tendency to hover over the macabre, to gawk and speculate and obsess over the unthinkable. "We have handed people like Lucas Meyer the building blocks they need," said one cybersecurity expert during an interview. "A man like him couldn't have become the Madman 50 years ago, but today he could exist and even flourish within the cracks of our infrastructure, all while the rest of us looked the other way." Platforms like Twitter and TikTok, which had played central roles in reigniting public focus during the investigation, were also scrutinized for their passivity. How had Meyer's content slipped through? Why had the systems in place failed to block it from being uploaded in the first place? Outrage pushed tech companies to promise stricter controls and sweeping policies to prevent similar events. But many doubted whether real change would come. "The internet is vast, too vast," said another analyst. "You cover one hole and another opens up. Until the system itself evolves, stories like Lucas Meyer's will disappear into the shadows until it's too late to stop them." A victory with no celebration. Animal rights organizations declared victories in the wake of the case. Massive donations surged, petitions were signed, and laws concerning animal trafficking were revisited in several countries. For once, the world seemed fully awake to the horrors of wildlife exploitation and animal cruelty. Still, behind the public progress, there was grief. Meyer's videos could not be unseen. The images of shattered cages, trembling animals, and an invisible tormentor would haunt many, not just individuals but an entire collective consciousness that watched helpless as it all unfolded. Activists understood that stopping Meyer had been only one step in a much larger journey. The broader issue of animal harm was not just about extraordinary criminals like Lucas Meyer. His crimes had become a glaring example of a systemic failure, one that allowed abuse to thrive quietly in markets, trade networks, and unregulated shadows that stretched across the globe. "He wanted us to watch and do nothing," said an animal welfare advocate in a raw speech following Meyer's sentencing. "We can't just call this justice and move on, not when so much harm continues every day, in ways we often don't even recognize." And, to some extent, they were right. Meyer's actions, placed under society's watchful eye, had shown the world the cruelty it often ignored. The internet's blurred morality. Perhaps one of the most unsettling aspects of the case lay in how millions had followed Meyer's crimes with a disturbing sense of fascination. Entire forums had cropped up overnight, studying every detail of the investigation, scrutinizing cryptic messages, dissecting footage frame by frame. What had been intended as justice-driven collaboration became a spectacle, and it was a spectacle that Meyer understood and exploited to perfection. Unlike the typical criminal, Meyer needed an audience. He didn't just revel in his acts of cruelty, he wanted people to see his work, react to it, argue about it. The internet wasn't just his hiding place, it was his theater. Meyer didn't just manipulate the people investigating him, said a cultural critic during a documentary on the case. He manipulated all of us. The hashtags, the live streams, the amateur theories. It wasn't resistance, it was fuel for him. He weaponized our outrage. For all the progress the case had made in uniting people for a cause, it also held up a painful mirror to society's darker impulses. Had the obsession over exposing Meyer crossed the line into voyeurism? Did it feed into exactly what Meyer wanted, a stage to display his pathological grievances? Internet communities wrestled with these difficult questions, and while some distances were created, specifically around content moderation, others still fell short in truly reconciling with what the case revealed. The warning Lucas left above all, Lucas Meyer had understood the world he lived in better than most. He understood how people clung to mysteries, how the internet amplified trauma, and how justice-driven obsession could drip into morbid fixation. He played on every system he'd encountered, challenging the idea that the world was truly in control. His final words were as much a confession as they were a warning. "There are more of me out there." And while Meyer now spent his life behind bars, the seeds of similar crimes had already been planted. His actions, his methodologies, and his impact had left open questions the world wasn't quite ready to answer. Who would follow him? How many others lurked, hiding in anonymity, waiting for their own moment, moving forward? In the end, Meyer's legacy remains a grim reminder of humanity's capacity for both connection and destruction. His story serves as both a wake-up call and a challenge. Could society evolve? Could we fix the cracks that allowed cruelty to seep through? Or would we cyclically fall into the same traps, allowing the next madman to wreak havoc in plain sight? While Meyer succeeded in leaving scars, the response to his crimes also reminded the world of its potential for light. Communities came together for justice, governments revisited laws, and individuals began to ask themselves hard questions about morality, responsibility, and prevention. As one investigator stated during a final press conference, "Lucas Meyer wanted us to feel powerless, but we aren't. Yes, we saw his darkness, but we also saw something greater. What happens when people refuse to look away? That's our lesson here, that's our warning, and that's our hope."